Hello and welcome to the Loop with Sloop, where we break down some of the most complex issues into easy to digest, bite-sized chunks. That is a mouthful. I'm your host, BrmdSloop, and today is going to be the first episode of the Learning the Web series. Basically, the purpose of this whole series is to basically start at the beginning, the very beginnings of the first thing that we do when we want to learn how to build a website, and then take us all the way out until we have a fully fledged functioning website that actually looks pretty good and is extremely useful. Also, if you guys have any questions throughout for anything that I say here, please feel free to leave it in the comments below or send me a message on YouTube. However, if you do send me a message, please tell me what video you're referencing in your question. It would really help, and also make your questions clear and concise. That really makes it so I can actually answer your questions. So today's episode is going to be focused more on getting you up to speed on the basics, explaining we're going to have three main parts here. First, we're going to explain exactly what HTML is. Second, we're going to take a look at the tools that you need before you can actually use HTML. And finally end by taking a little bit of a look at the syntax that we're going to use when we write HTML. If you have a little bit of familiarity with HTML already, go on and skip to episode 2. That's where we're going to do the coding. This is really just to get people up to speed if you've never been exposed to coding. So, section 1. What is HTML? Well, people like to throw around these kind of complex acronyms, and it can sound really intimidating, but really don't worry about that. HTML is very, very simple. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language. What you need to know is that it is basically the language that you're going to use to talk to the browser, to tell it what it's going to display. It's the most basic of languages that we use still today in terms of web design, and it acts kind of like a skeleton. HTML is the thing that we use to display the content. It's still sort of rudimentary, to tell you the truth, because it's a really old language. It's been around since the 1990s, and because of that, even though there has been some iterations and some advancements, it still is not fully equipped to do everything that we want. That's why we use some other languages like CSS, which is Cascading Style Sheet. That's what it stands for. That we use to manipulate many of the visual tweaks. We then implement JavaScript also for being able to do some really cool motion animation. But you're not going to have to worry about any of that. Just understand that HTML works as a team. It's part of other languages that we implement. But HTML is the most basic, it's the easiest to learn, and it is kind of the backbone of every single website out there. There's not a website that's designed that doesn't have at least some HTML inside of it. Now, with that said, let's move on to section 2. Finding the tools. This is an extremely important thing. If you don't have tools, obviously, it doesn't matter how much HTML you know. Now, the thing that I'm going to use is a text editor called Notepad++. This is what it looks like. Notepad++ is a very simple program. It's very effective, though. It does its job, and it does it well. You can download it at the link that's displayed right here or down in the description below. It'll take you to this place. You're going to download this one here on top. This is the basic installer. You don't have to worry about any of this stuff. It's kind of unimportant, to tell you the truth. You're just going to focus on this, getting Notepad++, getting it downloaded, so that way we can actually get some coding done. So once you have this thing open, well, what does that mean? Well, HTML is very unique in that we can actually take it and we can write it just simple text. It's just text that's on there. We just type it right into this text editor. And these text editors, if you want to use a different one, go ahead, feel free. There are plenty of them out there. I just preferred Notepad++, but if you use another one, that's totally fine. So yeah, let's get down to the actual real syntax of HTML. This is something that is extremely important as well. Probably the most important of anything that you should learn. When you are programming any language, you have to make sure that the syntax is right. In English, you don't have to worry about the commas nearly as much because you can still understand the sentence. But in a programming language, when you write something, it must have proper punctuation, if we want to use that phrase. It has to have proper brackets. It has to have the formula down. If you don't write it the correct way, the program will not run the way that you want it to run. HTML is no different than any other coding language in that aspect. However, HTML is a bit more forgiving than many other languages if you make a mistake. Oftentimes, browsers will try to interpret what you're trying to say, but you definitely don't want to rely on that because it can often interpret that wrong, or it could lead to later problems down the road. You may not see it immediately, and then you have to come back when there's some weird error, and you have to dig through 1,000 lines of code. So just make sure that you use the syntax. Here, let me show you the syntax now. Every single HTML document is going to start out with this tag. Oops, if I could actually type. There we go. HTML. This is the first tag. This basically tells the computer that it is an HTML document that you're using here. Now, you need to identify here the HTML tags are always written with these greater than less than signs before and after the actual symbol. It's important to have those so that way the computer knows, okay, this is going to be HTML. I can actually read this. Then, also, another important part of syntax for HTML is that we always have the closing tag. You see this slash here? That tells the computer that that is the end of the HTML document. It begins here and it ends here. Same kind of syntax is used on all of the tags. I'm going to give you a few examples. You don't have to memorize this now. We'll go over all this stuff later. But if we use B, for example, that is for bolding text. If we have some text inside of here, we can bold it. And then, whoops, if I could actually type as well, that will be bolded from this point to this point. If I have text that's out here, this stuff will not be bolded because it's after the closing tag. It's important to understand these things. Also, you need to understand that all HTML documents will be formatted in a certain way. It's broken up into two distinct parts. Now, I say this because if you don't have these two parts, it's just simply not going to be able to work. Now, the first part is the head section. It's really hard for me to explain it because it's intuitive when you actually write in the code, but explaining it with a generalized theme is a bit hard. But the head section kind of, it's where you put code that you don't want the user to see. For instance, we'll put some CSS code in here. You won't have to worry about that, but we'll put that in this section because it's not necessarily code that is displayed. It isn't content. Rather, it manipulates the content and says to change the color of the text or something, or change the size. That's just an example. It's information that's not directly displayed to the user. And there are a whole host of things that we put inside of the head to make sure that that's there. Inside of the head, another important thing that you're always going to put on every single document that you write, every single one, you need to put the title tag. Now, the title tag denotes what you want your tab to be called. You see up here, it says new 1-notepad++ right up here in the corner. This is the kind of thing that we're going to be implementing when we write title. We're going to call this program Hello World. And if I were to write that and save this as an actual document, it would say Hello World up here if I were to open the document. I'll give you an example here of just Notepad++. This is all inside of a title tag, this thing on there. You're always going to want to have that because the computer needs to know what the name of your tab is. Otherwise, it's going to call it some weird random name that's really odd and doesn't make any sense to its actual reference of the web. Beyond that, we also have the second section as well. This is the body section. Now, this also is open-close, just like the head section. And inside of the body is where you're going to put the real content. This is where you have your words. This is where you're going to say, this is my image, or whatever. This is the main content that you're going to display. And it's going to delineate the basic structure of your website as well. All of that stuff will make a lot more sense when we actually go into it, because once we can actually start doing it and manipulating it ourselves, it makes it much, much easier to understand. Another important thing to understand is that there is a specific difference between what you see on the screen here in this text editor and what the user is going to see. This text editor does not display the same thing unless you specifically delineate stuff. I'll give you an example. All right, so let's say I have some text that I wanted to type, and this looks, this is just random content that I have. You see these enters here, like the returns that go down to a next line. They will all be displayed on one line. They will actually look to the user like this. The reason for that is because every single thing needs to be delineated by a tag. If you want to put an enter in and a return, you can do that, but that's not going to do it. What will do it is putting in a tag. BR is the tag for page break. We'll go over it again, but the idea is to just understand that it is the tag that makes the end final product alter itself. So the content here, even though this is on one line looking to us, this BR being there will make that appear to the user on 2 lines. If we delete it, the same thing is true about the enter here in reverse. It's a very simple concept, but it's something that is important to always understand and always keep in mind while you're coding. Remember always to look for that. On top of that, I think it's also important for us to understand exactly how to save this kind of document. So let's say we go up here and we're done with this thing. We want it to be permanently saved. You can't just do File, Save As, and then just press Save. Don't do that, because it'll save it as a .txt, which is .text file. Virtually all text editors do that because it's the most basic of things. It can be read by anything. But what you want is an HTML document, not a text document. We want something that can talk to a browser and not just be random words. So what you're going to do is you're going to save it as a name. Also, never use capitals in your name. On the web, it's okay on your computer, but on the web, it will not recognize it if it's not in lowercase. It's important to understand. I've had many a headache caused by putting a capital automatically. Definitely something you want to avoid. Save yourself some future headaches. But you can see here what I've done. I've written .html at the end, and Notepad++ is smart enough to figure out that HTML, that end tag, is a type of file extension and will save it as an HTML document. It is important that you do this. Now watch what happens when I do this here. We save it. I have another document, so I'm just going to replace that, and it's on my desktop now. And look how these tags have changed. You see they've turned blue. Each one of those tags is turned blue because each one is an HTML tag. It's recognized by Notepad++, and it will separate it out for us. This makes our life a lot easier. Rather than just having same black text, it's really hard to see the difference between word and tag. You can now easily see where your tags begin and end. And you can see as I highlight them here, this is the beginning of the tag, this is the end of the tag. And it's specifically designed to show you exactly that sort of thing. So that gives you kind of a user feature to be able to easily see the data that we have on the screen. It's really nice for being able to do that, because when you have a ton of code, it can be very confusing when looking at just black. These blue tags make your life a lot easier. Now here's another important thing to understand about Notepad++. You see these minuses here? You can actually click them and it will subtract everything inside of that area. If I put some content in here, it just subtracts it. This seems kind of stupid, but it's really awesome when you have, 10 pages worth of stuff and you keep having to scroll through things and it's confusing. So this allows you to be able to focus on the code that you want to look at rather than just the entire document. Saves you a bit of time. It's important to understand. I think that's going to be all I'm going to cover in this episode. It kind of gives you a little bit of a taste of the waters. Hopefully I'll see you guys in episode 2. And oh, by the way, congratulations, you have finally entered the loop. As corny as that may indeed sound. I'll see you guys next time.